In 1984, at the age of 18, John Boyd Jr. bought a farm for the hefty sum of $51,000. Boyd's ancestors have always been tied to the land. His great-grandfather was enslaved and forced to work the land under the brutal chattel slavery system, and during Jim Crow, Boyd's grandfather owned land but was always fearful of it being taken from him, so he slept with the deed under his bed every night. After Boyd purchased the land of his future cattle and soybean farm, it wasn't as simple as sowing seeds and reaping the harvest. At every step of the way, Boyd was stymied, insulted, and degraded by the racist machinations of the U.S. Department of Agriculture Local Extension Office. While his white neighbors easily secured six-figure loans without even applying, Boyd, a black farmer, had to struggle to even schedule a meeting with the extension agent. But what Boyd experienced isn't unusual for black farmers in the United States. In fact, it's the standard. Today, we're going to look at the history of black farmers in the US. A history of trauma, racism, and dispossession that has led to this graph, but also a history that reveals the power of resilience and collective resistance in the face of oppression, and the need to forge a new food system in relationship with the land that foregrounds reparations, anti-colonialism, and an anti-capitalist mindset. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream, which now comes with Nebula for free when you sign up using the link in the description. The United States was built on a system of chattel slavery and the violent exploitation and dehumanization of enslaved people. And to assume that the effects of this system are somehow in the past is just incorrect and ahistorical. The ramifications of the United States' slave economy pervades every aspect of policy and culture in this country, including farming. Most of the ancestors of black farmers today were enslaved people forced to work, bleed, and tend to land that was stolen by white settlers from thousands of tribes and First Nations indigenous to the land before the Europeans arrived. Farming in the United States is thus intertwined with the dual legacy of settler colonialism and white supremacist capitalist exploitation of black people. As a result, the black American farmer's experience is rooted in the trauma caused by white settlers and farmers, and the discrimination they faced from institutions and structures. But the history of black American relationship with land doesn't start and end with chattel slavery. The legacy of black farmers is a rich tapestry of resilience, ingenuity, and defiance against a white supremacist nation. In the wake of the American Civil War, the Secretary of War Edmund Stanton urged Union General William T. Sherman to sit down with 20 leaders of the black community in Savannah, Georgia, and ask them a simple question. What do you want for your own people? The unequivocal answer from the participants, all of whom were ministers and many of whom were formerly enslaved people, was that the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor. These 20 men knew that in the capitalist settler colonial United States, owning and tending to your own land was the surest form of freedom. 4 days later, on January 17, 1965, Sherman issued Special Field Order 15, which carved out 400,000 acres of land in the South for formerly enslaved people to farm and steward. This order is the origin of the phrase 40 acres and a mule, and was based on the ideas and recommendations of the local black community, not then President Abraham Lincoln. Over 40,000 black Americans took to the land, but the victory was fleeting. After Andrew Johnson assumed the presidency in April of the same year, he worked to dismantle the proclamation and eventually began reversing and stealing back the ceded land. Farming while black after the Civil War was a constant struggle. Most black farmers were forced into exploitative sharecropping relationships with white farmers who still owned much of the farmland around the United States. Sharecropping preserved many of the profitable parts of the chattel slavery system for Southern white landowners. Black farmers were forced to rent farmland from white landholders in exchange for an often meager share of the harvest. In short, white landholders stole the harvest of black sharecroppers by claiming it was payment for renting their land. Yet despite the prominence of sharecropping, the number of black farmers continued to rise to its peak in 1920, when black farmers totaled 925,708, or 14.3% of all the farmers in the United States. But ever since, the constant racialized terror campaigns of white Southerners and institutional racism perpetrated by federal programs like the USDA, however, have pushed black farmers and communities to migrate en masse from the rural South to the industrial North. Indeed, as black folks in the South resisted Jim Crow laws, historian Pete Daniel writes that USDA programs were sharpened into weapons to punish civil rights activity. He goes on to add that planters evicted tenants and sharecroppers who attempted to register to vote and replaced them with machines and chemicals. In addition, the consolidation of farmland into fewer and fewer rich white hands and the simultaneous industrialization of those large plots meant that farmers in 20th century America either had to get big or get out. Getting big for white farmers was by no means easy, but was certainly simpler than the black farmers' experience. White farmers could apply for large loans at local agricultural extension offices and could expect some help from their USDA agent who looked like them. Black farmers, on the other hand, like John Boyd Jr., had to fight tooth and nail to even get a small loan to buy the needed machinery, chemicals, and seed required to even begin to compete with white industrialized mega farmers. And while redlining and racist housing policies forced black communities into undesirable areas in the city, the ag extension agents were making it difficult for black farmers to buy land in rural areas, let alone tend to it. All of this led to the precipitous decline of black farmers in the United States from 1920 to 1997. Black farmers went from 14.3% of the farming population to 1.4% as of the 2017 agricultural census. One estimate puts the total economic hit to black wealth from land loss to be in excess of $300 billion. But despite the constant racial oppression, black farmers still resisted. Butting up against the racist exploitation of black farmers is their ironclad resilience in the face of oppression. It was black farmers who popularized efficient farming on small acreage. It is because of black farmers that we have community-supported agriculture models, or CSAs, and it's because of black farmers that we have mechanized seed planters. Despite centuries of racist oppression and exploitation, black farmers have been at the vanguard of liberation and regenerative farming practices. Take, for example, the Tuskegee Institute, an educational institution originally helmed by Booker T. Washington, which fostered the research of George Washington Carver, who traveled the country during the late 1800s, educating black farmers on the importance of crop diversification, composting, and proto-organic techniques to help sharecroppers make enough profit to purchase their land, feed their families, and achieve economic autonomy. Later on in the 1920s and early 1930s, rural farmers from the Black Belt and communists from city centers banded together to resist the exploitative circumstances of sharecropping. Historian Robin G. Kelly chronicles this in his book, Hammer and Hoe. He writes that after the 1931 harvest in rural Tallapoosa County, for example, several landlords withdrew all cash and food advances from black tenant farmers in a calculated effort to generate labor for the newly built Russell Sawmill. As a result of this clear wage exploitation, black sawmill workers and farmers in the vicinity enthusiastically welcomed communist leadership, and hundreds joined the local union. The movement had 7 basic demands, like the continuation of food advances, the right of sharecroppers to market their own crops, and a minimum wage of $1 per day. Kelly goes on to write, however, that although the newly organized laborers did achieve small wins, white fears of a growing black farmer uprising quickly escalated the situation. Egged on by the white landlords and the local sheriff, a group of deputized white vigilantes raided a meeting of organized sharecroppers, brutally beating men and women alike. In the days that followed, violent raids and assaults on black farmers continued. Yet the union still managed to agitate for better conditions. All over the country and across the late 1800s and into the 1900s, black farmers organized themselves to create better conditions. For example, the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union, which pooled money and resources to buy land for landless black farmers, boasted 1.2 million members at its peak. These collective resources were essential, because even when black farmers freed themselves from the debt peonage of tenant farming, the U.S. Department of Agriculture made the reality of being a black farmer extremely difficult. In 1997, however, a group of black farmers, of which John Boyd Jr. was included, took the federal government to court for its decades of racist policies and actions, and 2 years later won the most money of any civil rights case in the country's history. And in 1998, the USDA released a report admitting that decades of discrimination led to the decline of black-owned farms, and some $1 billion was paid out to roughly 20,000 black farmers. But as farmer James McGill notes, this is way too little, too late.
We got $50,000 a piece. And that was an insult, because when you needed $300,000 or $400,000 and they gave you $50,000, how could you survive on $50,000 to recover what you lost?
Black farmers in the United States have carved out spaces for themselves via resistance and struggle. But at each and every stage, the white supremacist institutions of this country have sought to reverse any piece of liberation that they've achieved. The United States has stolen the land it now settles on twice. Once from those already living, farming, and stewarding the land before settlers planted their European heels into its mud, and twice when it stole land from under the hoe of black growers. But today, black farmers still continue to farm, reclaiming the stolen and standing up in defiance against the white supremacist capitalist agricultural system. We see this in places like the Earthseed Land Collective, a community of black creatives and visionaries who came together to buy and then build a working farm rooted in justice, food sovereignty, and community relationships. We see this also in Soulfire Farm, which draws on Afro-Indigenous roots to grow food for marginalized communities in the greater Albany area, while educating and sharing wisdom on anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, and anti-racist farming practices. Each carve out their pieces of land and integrate into a larger tapestry of black farmers and farmers of color spread across the US that are showing us the importance of land not only as a vessel for liberation, but also for healing relationships between the earth and people.
Revolution is based on land. Land is the basis of all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality.
There have been a number of solutions proposed by members of Congress on how to repair the damage and trauma stacked on black farmers. Senator Cory Booker proposed legislation that would devote $8 billion annually to buying farmland and granting it to black farmers. But cattle farmer Chris Newman argues that the bill is so loaded with oversights, anti-solidarity, and implied acceptance of settler colonial agricultural ethics that it can't even be viewed as incremental progress or a step in the right direction. So what then might just reparations look like? How might white folks repair the harm our ancestors and us today have caused? What does a future that prioritizes black farmers look like? And how might the United States repair the violent damage caused by twice stolen land? Leah Penniman of Soulfire Farm writes that reparations should incorporate 3 principles. Dispossessed people get to define what reparations look like. We must have transfers of land and resources without oversight or conditionality, and we must give the land, money, and jobs away, even and especially when it entails personal and organizational sacrifice. Land in this white supremacist, settler colonial, and capitalist country is and has always been a battleground of oppression. So changing our relationship to that land is essential to creating change. And right now, there are many black farmers fostering that change. And I've highlighted just a few of those growers of color finding alternatives to industrial agriculture in an extended edition of this video, which you can find on Nebula. That extended edition replaces this ad because there are no ads on Nebula. And you'll not only see a lot of extended editions, exclusive content, and ad-free videos over on Nebula from me, but also from channels like Second Thought, who just released the first episode of his Nebula original series exploring the history, ideology, and contemporary resurgence of fascism. It's amazing and I highly recommend watching it. But at its core, Nebula allows viewers to support creators directly so they don't have to worry about the pesky YouTube algorithm. Nebula is awesome, but it's now made even better with our partnership with CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream is the go-to streaming platform for thousands of top-tier documentaries, like one of my favorites, the documentary series The History of Food, which dives into everything from the invention of cooking to how our food system became so industrialized. And because CuriosityStream loves supporting educational creators, we worked out a deal where if you sign up with the link below, not only do you get access to CuriosityStream, but you'll also get Nebula for free. And this isn't a trial. You'll have Nebula as long as you're a CuriosityStream member. What's even better is that CuriosityStream has a special deal for my viewers. 26% off their annual plan. That's a little over $1 a month for both CuriosityStream and Nebula. By signing up, you not only directly support our changing climate, but you gain access to thousands of documentaries and exclusive videos from your favorite creators. So if you want to support both Our Changing Climate and hundreds of other educational content creators, go to curiositystream.com/OCC or click the link in the description and sign up for CuriosityStream and Nebula for just $14.79 per year. That's 26% off. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. If you've already signed up for CuriosityStream, you can also support me by becoming an Our Changing Climate patron on Patreon. Just pledging $1 a month allows me the flexibility to keep making more videos like this. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.